Hello and welcome to another episode of Coaching from the Heart. I am your host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me as always is my good friend, colleague, and co-host, Harold Feddersen.
Hey, Tyler.
Hello there, Harold. Thanks for being with us today. So our topic for today is it's kind of a long one, and we'll explain all about it in a minute. But it's called the elusiveness of the ego thought system. But before we jump into the topic at hand, just want to let folks know how to find both Harold and myself. So you can reach me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com, and you can find all my contact information there and all sorts of fun videos and articles. And Harold, how can everybody get in contact with you?
You can like my Facebook page, The Awakening Heart, or you can subscribe or follow. I think it's follow is the word they use at WordPress. My blog, which is Heart to Hand, and there's a freshly pressed post from yesterday.
Oh, I haven't read it yet. I'm going to have to jump on there and get to that. All right, fantastic. Fantastic. So, just as a reminder to folks, Harold and I are both transformative coaches. We work with people to help awaken their hearts, kind of take people on a journey of truth and self-discovery. And so if you're interested in that, then reach out to either one of us and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. So the topic for today is the elusiveness of the ego thought system. What the heck does that mean? so I realize now it's kind of convoluted, but let's start with the ego as a thought system. Let's start there. So the ego is one of those words, as is many of the ones we use on this show. But the ego is one of those words that people use in a lot of different ways to mean a lot of different things. And I just want to make a distinction around that, which is the ego we're talking about. And I think we have agreement between the two of us on this. We'll find out as the show goes. But the ego we're not talking about is kind of the world of psychology's depiction of the ego, or its definition of the ego, which is more to do with kind of personality, like a way of showing up with our personality, being egotistical, being very self-centered, that kind of thing. That is a little bit different than the ego Harold and I are going to be talking about for the most part today, which has a little bit more, or maybe a lot more broader scope to it, and it's more in a spiritual context, but very simply put, and one of the ways that I think about the ego that doesn't confuse me is it's a thought system. So it's a way of thinking, but in particular, or we could also say it's a part of the mind, right? So a thought system, a part of the mind, the same thing essentially. But in particular, it's a part of the mind or a thought system that's based in separation and specialness and individuality, and it's the source of our sort of separate ego selves. So that the concept that we all have about who we are, that's made of the ego thought system. Anything you want to add to that, kind of the distinction of like what the heck the ego is, Harold, before we jump into the elusiveness of the ego?
Well, I'm curious in your definition how does the ego then interact with the body?
Well, why don't you start us there?
Oh, okay. Because in my understanding and experience thus far is that the ego is a circular pattern of thinking.
Right.
So it's like a repetitive thought process.
Mm-hmm.
And our many of our actions and movements in the body can be affected by the thought process.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sounds like you had a little something else there.
Oh, it's not the only place, because obviously we can move through the world um, from a different place, because the ego is
It,
like a structure in a
it's
sense.
kind of one of two places, right? that we can move from. And we've talked about this before on the show, haven't we?
Right? Are those love and fear?
That would be one way of talking about it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another way of making the distinction between love and fear could be ego and spirit, or ego and God. Do you have any other words for that distinction, Harold?
Well, like your true nature.
Yeah.
It's hard because
Higher self,
yeah, the essence of your
lower
being.
self.
Some
Yeah.
people call it soul.
So and so those are all just words to point us kind of in a direction. Um, but yeah, I think essentially we're on mostly the same page as far as what ego we're talking about. Because yeah, it will, or it can be one of those places that a lot of our behavior flows from. Usually there's sort of insecurity there, there's fear. Um, yeah, there's that fear again, that love and fear, right? Um, and in my experience, one of the places I have learned the most about the ego is from the book A Course in Miracles. So if anybody out there is interested, um, that I think whenever we talked about forgiveness, was that last week? I can't remember, but I said the Course in or A Course in Miracles could easily be retitled A Course in Forgiveness. Well, it could also very easily be retitled A Course in the Ego, right? Because it's kind of, it helps us to understand that thought system and kind of disassociate from it a little bit, because one of the things that gets us into trouble is us thinking we are that thought system. So we identify with it. We identify with that insecurity, we identify with that fear, and all the actions that flow from that. And it gets us into all sorts of trouble, and it can make our lives, it can make a huge difference in our lives when we begin to kind of get a little bit more of a bird's eye view, sort of an observer's view of our mind, and we can see, oh, there's sort of these two thought systems, and we're always kind of choosing between the two. We're kind of bouncing back and forth. Out of habit, I think most of us, most of the time, are choosing the ego thought system, just because that's what we're familiar with. That's kind of what the world tends to be based in. That's where most of our agreement with other people, we agree about ego type ideas, and we'll get more into kind of what those might be in a minute. But yeah, so that's a little bit about the kind of ego we're going to be talking about. It's It's based in fear. Like you said, Harold, it's very circular in nature, which is part of the elusiveness topic at hand. And are you ready to jump into that part of it, Harold, or is there any more you want to add to the actual kind of defining the ego a little bit more?
Well, I'm curious about what you said with there are two thought systems.
Mm.
So I just want to clarify so I understand.
Yeah, so for like we were kind of making the distinction love and fear. So um, another way to kind of think about those two things, or to see those as thought systems. So they're ideas in the mind, and they're sort of all encompassing. So like the ego thought system, it's self-contained. It does what it's designed to do, which is engender fear for the most part. That's kind of what it's based in. That's kind of what it's about. And there are all sorts of different forms for that. And then the other is based in love, right? So they're you can think about them as thought systems. You can think about them as ways of being. You can think about them as ways of showing up in the world. I just tend to think about them as thought systems. So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
Okay. So why don't you start us off with the kind of how that circular thinking tends to show up. So we were gonna kind of focus in on the context of spirituality or spiritual practice or um, something like that, right?
Okay, so one of the sort of fundamental sort of ways that the egoic thought structure works is there needs to be two sides to it. There needs to be a side, like a good side, so to speak, and a bad side.
Mm.
So, for example, the right and wrong, you know, the ego wants
Yeah.
to be right for the most part, unless it gets its value out of being wrong. But there has to be the two sides. And that's part of the nature of the ego. The nature of the ego is there is an I, which is separate from, reality.
Right, and that's what I was
Um,
talking about, is the separate self. There's got to be, it's dualistic, right? Is what
yeah.
you're pointing to.
hmm And what's interesting about it is once you can, I think you used the word, get some elevation on it.
Mm.
I like to think of it like you just sort of step back.
Right.
You can watch your ego, if you will, just operating. Like you can actually just watch yourself, and you just. I remember years ago, just watching myself almost filling out a script that was
Mm.
already written. Like it's so like everything's kind of predetermined
Gotcha.
from an ego's point of view, right? So there's a sense of lifelessness to it in that sense, in the sense that
Yeah.
it's very predictable and
Very mechanical and
yeah, reactionary and
right.
um, the ego's always trying to come out on top, unless its value system is based on coming out underneath. We both probably know people like that where it's like, oh, everything's so hard for me, all the time. It's like that's where they get their ego is. Its value is in the being the always the under.
Yeah, and that's what you and I both have talked about on this show. The kind of the victim role, right? Is essentially what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But one of the ways I talk about that, because I love how you said it, it can be either or, right? It's an either or thought system. So no matter which side you are on the either or, you're going to be getting value from the ego perspective. It's going to be feeding the ego, in other words.
Mhm.
And so one of the ways I talk about it is specialness. Now, not in the special like it's wonderful, but special as in separate and different. And sometimes I talk about it as we are either especially, um, you know, good or especially bad, or we are especially the guilty party, or we are especially the victim party. But either way, it's special. It's different. It's a way of separating ourselves out from everybody else, and that's kind of one of the ego's functions. Is to say it's that dualism of saying I'm different from you. I have different bodies, different shapes, different voices, different actions, different behaviors, different IQs. You know, that's the whole world of form is based in separation and dualism. And so that's one, just kind of another way of thinking about it.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a, that's it, it can get really heady really quick.
Sure.
Um, but one way to to find out where you're coming from is, am I just picking one side of two sides? Which isn't to say, we shouldn't have, we're not going to have opinions about, the world or, how people move in the world. But there's a certain kind of sticky nature to it where,
Yeah.
I'm on this side of duality and I'm totally right.
And
Like,
it's the right side.
this is the right one. Like, if you would just understand. And I'm
Yeah.
not even like, attached to this, but seriously, this is the right side. Because you can actually experience having an opinion without having the sticky nature to it.
Yeah, without being kind of identified with the opinion or attached to the opinion, I think is maybe the word
Hmm.
I'm looking for. Because it's like, so long as we're in the world, that's going to be part of it, right? We're going to have preferences, we're going to have opinions about everything. That's kind
Hmm.
of, that's one of the things we're doing here. Is making distinctions between all sorts of stuff and events and people and places. And
It's like my body prefers strawberries over raspberries, but that doesn't mean strawberries are better than raspberries.
yeah, and kind of to take it a little bit higher level, one of the ways that I think about it is from a preference and opinion standpoint is, yeah, I would prefer to have, Thai food tonight, or, it could be anything, right? Um,
Thai food would be a good choice.
yeah, I know you're a little under the weather, so hot, soupy type stuff is good. But if I don't get it, then what? Right? So if you're attached, then what that essentially means is we will allow that to affect our nature, our well-being, essentially. Um, we get to say, yeah, this is my preference, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be unhappy, or I'm going to be upset, or I'm going to be pissed off.
Somebody's in trouble.
Somebody's in trouble, right? And I'm coming for them. Or if you have learned to see from that bird's eye view, or like you said, step back a bit, you can see this has nothing to do with my essential self or my innate well-being, is one of the ways I talk about it. Um, and it's still okay to have that preference. But you know that if you don't get it, because sometimes in the world of form, guess what, Harold? We don't get what we want. I know that's a shock to everybody out there, right? But as best we try, we live in a world with billions of other people who have different preferences to us. And it just so happens in that world, we don't always get exactly what our preference is. And so knowing kind of about the nature of preferences, it can be helpful, or opinions, which are all sort of, sure, they're functions of the ego, but we don't have to identify with those as heavily as we do now. And that can be very liberating. It can be a very wonderful thing to be able to step back from this thing that we really, really, really want and be like, yeah, but I don't need it. I don't need it. Need. There's a terrible saying that I use sometimes that really pisses people off, but it's accurate in the sense that I say need presupposes death if the condition is not met. Right? That's pretty extreme.
So
And there's
where does ice cream fall into that then?
Yeah, usually not high on the list, right? Now, emotionally, that might be a terrible, terrible thing for some people. But yeah, so, and there's very few things, right, that fit into that category. And they're all time sensitive, right? So oxygen, depending on how good your lung capacity is, you can go 2 minutes to 10 minutes, maybe. Water, I think that's a few days, a week. I can't remember exactly. Food, quite a long time, actually. A month, maybe more.
Maybe 40 days.
Yeah. Nice little biblical nod there. So yeah. So back to the ego, the ego topic. So so we were going to talk about the sort of the spiritual, in a spiritual context, right? One of the ways you and I had talked about it before the show was the ego loves to hijack our spiritual practices, right? For its own, for fortifying itself, right? For reinforcing the ego self, or the ego mind, or the ego thought system. Those are, you can use those all interchangeably. And that's to do with that circular nature of thinking. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, Harold.
Yeah. So, when you first start some kind of practice, there's that fresh newness to it, and you're just fully alive, and you're present through the process, whatever it is, whether it's painful or joyful or what have you. And then there comes a point where the ego's like, oh yeah, I got this. Yeah, we're gonna sit on that cushion. I get it. We're gonna go into the quiet time. Down for that. And then it just kind of it wants to just take over the show and run it. And then what happens is that aliveness just totally disappears, and you become it just becomes like this ritual. I remember listening to Adyashanti, who's a spiritual teacher out of California, and he said, he would, when he was studying Zen, and he would be with these people who had been sitting meditating for like 30 years, and nothing had changed. They were more peaceful, and they were really nice to be around because they were totally on top of all of their sort of negative outward talk, but they hadn't really gotten anywhere. And I remember him being curious and saying, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this if it's not really doing anything? And there's actually a belief out there that enlightenment is what the Zen people are going for, is that enlightenment takes a long time. Like, you just got to put in the hours on the cushion, and somehow once you hit some magical number for you, it's, bingo bango. And that's a perfect example of when the ego sort of just takes over the show, and they're meditating now for a reason. It's like, well, once I meditate long enough, then I'm going to be enlightened, and that's what I'm shooting for. And
Right.
whereas it's just totally false, right? It's totally false. Because if you can just allow that whole thought structure to just fall away, boom, there's reality and all its infinite clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that example. You go ahead.
I make that sound like, hey, it's boom. Just
It's easy,
drop
piece of cake, right? Well,
the thoughts.
here's how I think about it, because I love that you brought up the meditation example, because it's one of the ones I use sometimes, where it is that beginning. There's like, when we stumble onto great truth, some kind of deeper truth, right? It was one of my favorite quotes. I might have actually shared it on the show before. But Winston Churchill, he said, everyone in their life stumbles upon great truth at some point or another. And most of us get up, dust ourselves off, and move on as if nothing happened. Right? But most people, especially probably people listening or watching this show, have probably stumbled upon to something that seems deeply and profoundly true. Maybe they heard somebody speaking. They could have just been quiet, and seen something sort of with their inner sight, and they just knew there was something more to them than meets the eye. Or we talk about things having the ring of truth to them. Sometimes things just, wow, that just feels true. Not true as in like, yeah, it's true I had a burrito for lunch, but but true as in a deeper truth to the very nature and essence of who we are, right? Are we bodies? Are we our brains? Are we more than that? Is there more to us? Is there something greater, something, we talk about a greater power, that kind of thing. And most people I talk to have had that kind of experience. And then what almost is guaranteed to happen is the ego doesn't want you to continue along those lines. It doesn't want you to continue to have more of that, because it threatens the ego's infrastructure. So like I said, the ego is based in separateness, specialness, difference, levels. I'm better than you, you're better than me. I'm different than you, you're different than me. There's separation, my body's better. You could talk about it just infinite number of different ways, how we're different, right? But almost every single deeper spiritual truth speaks to a oneness or a unity or a connectedness, some way in which we're all the same. And in fact, a lot of spiritual traditions point to the fact how not only are we the same, but we are one. We're not separate in any way, in any meaningful way. And so what the ego says is, hold on a second here. This part of me that identifies with being a separate individual, different, special person is being threatened by this, by our the observer that we are, loosening our identification with that ego self and looking in a different direction and saying, oh, maybe there's more to me, maybe there's more to us than I previously thought. Let me go explore that. So as we go explore that, the ego says, haha, I've got a foolproof plan. I'm going to make them think they're exploring this deeper truth, when in fact, what you and I talked about, Harold, was as the ego hijacks our spiritual practice. So one of the ways I think about that, just a basic example is, so there's that experience of truth, right? It's not really an intellectual understanding. It's not, you can't.
You can't think your way into it.
Yeah, Harold, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you absolutely cannot use the mind that you use every day, the mind that you've been using for decades and decades. You cannot access it from there.
Right, that sort of thinking, logical, step-by-step brain processes.
Yeah.
That doesn't get us there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just think of a really simple example. Every single person who's listening to this has had the experience of being completely engrossed in something. It could be something like, like painting, or it could be, walking in nature. It could be, like rock climbing. It could be anything where their whole, you don't even realize it's happening, but all of a sudden, like, you are the rock climbing.
Right.
And we've all had, I think in the 90s, we called it you were in the zone. I think that's
flow. Flow was another way of talking.
I think that came after the year 2000. Yeah, the flow. We just changed the word for it, but
exactly.
But we've all experienced it. And we've experienced it many times in our lives. It's like, holy cow! It's like, where did the last hour go? And you also experience it when you're driving. You're driving, then all of a sudden you're like, holy cow! I'm already at this this little town or whatever. And then there's that moment when you say to yourself, wow, like I'm in the zone. And that is the moment that the ego steps in, and you're no longer the rock climbing. You're now a person rock climbing.
Right. Yeah.
As an
There's
example.
a difference between you and the rock, right?
Yeah. All of a sudden now there's two of us, and that's we've all had that experience. We have it all. Hopefully we have it a lot. So we can get the sense of it, because when you were the rock climbing, I don't know, I'm using the rock climbing. When you were the rock climbing, you weren't. I'm not going to say you weren't thinking, because you're most likely thinking, but it's like just thinking's happening. It's like, oh, and then I'm going to reach over here, and it's not even like, it's like you just reach. It's like it's a totally different. You're not in that thought structure place anymore. You're outside of that. You're actually just. Yeah, there's not really. I don't have a word for it.
Like your being is maybe a word I would use. You're not thinking, you're not processing, you're not intellectualizing. It's an experience. You're in the experience of whatever you're experiencing.
Yeah, and it's impossible.
But yeah, it's impossible to talk about. But we're doing the best we can. Right?
Sorry. Yeah.
So, but there is a sense of not being identified with that separate self. Usually that's kind of in there somewhere. Not that we would think about it like you're not in it thinking, oh, I'm not part of this. I'm no longer. So it's just not. It's just a way of describing. So like we said, we're doing the best we can with something that you can't really put into words. But one of the, I think, really easy ways to catch wise to the ego doing its thing, which can be helpful as a starting point of just identifying less with that thought system. It's not really a strategy, it's just an understanding, right? Is a concentration on form. So one of the ways I talk about the physical universe or the physical world is a world of form. And that's another way of saying separate stuff, right? Or separate objects or separate bodies, or it's the dualism, right? But and it could be it could be behaviors as well, so forms of behavior, but behaviors are to do with bodies, and you know you're not in the flow. First of all, you'll know if you're there, right? It's pretty straightforward. But
Well, actually, you
sometimes,
won't know if you're there
well, yeah,
because you'll just be there.
the you that you think you are won't know,
Yeah.
right? It probably won't even be part of it, because it's one of the things keeping us from the flow, is our identification with that self. But it's just a way of understanding is, if you're focused on the form, you're off track a little bit. Not that there's a right track necessarily, or a wrong track, because that's an ego thought system, right? But it's kind of like a barometer saying, like, we can always check in kind of with where we're at, right? And of course, again, it wouldn't even occur to us to check in with ourselves if you're there. But sometimes we think we're there and we're not. And that's kind of what we're pointing to, is when the ego thought system or the ego mind hijacks our spiritual practice. Usually the way it does it is, look at me doing this spiritual thing, right? Could be meditation, could be it could be rock climbing, could be my my daily affirmation list, could be what are some things, Harold, that you can think of that you might normally associate as sort of spiritual activities?
I think of this might be offensive to some people, but that's fine.
Well, that's what we're here for. Controversy.
People go to church,
Okay, yeah, the ritual of attending church.
Yeah, that just going to church is somehow
Attending, like
Yeah,
physically attending
walking
what they
through
call
the doors.
the house of God, right?
Yeah.
Which is another interesting thing we could talk about. But yeah, so that's a great one. That's a great one.
Yep.
Prayer, the act of prayer. Like, I've got to get into the pose, right? The physical stance, if you will, or position. What are some of it's ritual. They're rituals. So we all know what rituals are. They're behavioral in nature. For the most part, there could be some thought rituals, but I don't really know how that would work necessarily. But so if it's sort of behavioral in nature, or to do with form, or like getting the technique right,
which is big in meditation, right?
Which is big in meditation. That's why I love that example that you use.
Yeah, you have to be in the full lotus on
exactly.
on a 1-inch blanket in order to reach enlightenment. That's it. So
but guess what? People throughout history have experienced the peace and the love of God outside of the lotus position.
Yeah, more people have than haven't, actually. Yeah.
That would be my guess. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but
yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to compile, actually. But yeah,
yeah, but that's like, if there's an exception to it, then it's not a causal force. So that's where it gets tricky, right? It starts out as this pure, wow, I've had this pure experience of truth. I like to talk about it as truth. Could be spirit, beauty, whatever it is for you. But it was this experience, and then the ego mind says, yeah, but look what you were doing when you had that experience. And then we say, oh yeah, I was rock climbing. Maybe I'll rock climb every day at 5 p.m. on the same rock, in the same way, right? With the same people, same friends. and maybe I can recreate that. And it's just missing the point. It's we're off target a little bit when that's your focus. So I want to make very clear, though, ritual is not bad, right? It's not bad. It's not good either. And to be fair, but it's not the source of what is already innate within us. I think, Harold, you and I before have talked about a manufacturing expedition as opposed to um, a mining or an excavation.
Mm-hmm.
An uncovering expedition. So that's a great distinction for the misunderstanding that occurs with our spiritual journeys, right? Is we turn it, our ego mind wants to turn it into a manufacturing journey. How can I create more love in my life? How can I create a more peaceful experience of life? And then guess what comes out of that? Ritual, behavior, goal setting, and achieving. Again, none of those bad things, but they're all based in a misunderstanding of source, the source of love, the source of peace, the source of spirit. The very mere fact you can experience that deeper truth rock climbing or brushing your teeth or on the toilet or out in nature or in the middle of a busy city, right? The mere fact that you can experience those deeper truths in all those different places, it kind of tells us it's not about where where our body is standing or the way in which it's moving or the kind of things that we're literally actually saying, because that can be a ritual too, like chanting and repeating words. It's just not about that. It's this innate thing. It's this home base, if you will, this starting point. Harold, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the word home is a good word for that, because so in the rock climbing example,
Take
there
us
you are.
back there.
Let's go back to the wall. So there's the point where there's just the climbing, like you're completely, every aspect of every aspect of your being, everything is just completely engulfed in what's going on. And then the initial separation happens where we're like, wow, I'm really feeling it today. And then naturally, it's kind of twofold. One, the ego's like, yeah, dude, we want more of that. But also, where we were when we were in that space, what we were is our home. That's our natural state. So it's actually what we're kind of drawn towards naturally. And so it's funny because it's very common to make the ego of the villain and the bad guy. It's but it's not. It's not at all. It's just part of the just part of the thing.
Yeah.
But what the ego usually will do is, in the rock climbing example, it gets to the top, and then all of a sudden it becomes the champion, and it's like, I owned this rock, and
I did it, and
yeah, it's like at me, and that's totally fine. But it can also go the other way, where all of a sudden it's the ego's like, yeah, I want that, like that other thing that was going on when I was coming up, right? And then that becomes the search. But you you can't, like, you didn't create that in the first place.
right,
It's because if you say to yourself, I want that again, I want to go back to that, you can't get it from there, because there's a you that's trying to experience the it. You're in the
right.
duality conversation. There's a you, and then
It's
there's the thing.
it's different from the you that you think you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to experience that again, but you weren't experiencing that. It was just, that's what was going on.
Hmm.
um
Yeah, that's the separation. Yeah, I love how you said that. It becomes the dualistic dynamic, the either or,
yeah,
the me and you.
I'm in the flow, I'm not, this is
Yeah.
easy, it's not easy.
That is in my experience, well, it's easy and it's not easy. It's a great portrayal of this whole thing is the pursuit of happiness, right? That's where I think it's so easy to get lost in it, and it's also really easy to see there that circular way of thinking, and the elusiveness of the ego, right? So one of the ways, like you just talked about it, Harold. Okay, I want to get there. I want to create that again. I want to I want to have that experience again. I want to manufacture that again because I did it in the first place. Of course, I did. Right. Um,
And
and
it's
so,
tricky,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
because it's because it's our natural state, it's our home, as you said, and the ego also says, yeah, dude, that felt really good, we should do that again. um but if you go back, what is how did it occur? How was it just you on this wall? Like, how was that possible? And the only answer that
Yeah.
seems to show is you're graced with it. Because you can't create it, you cannot make it happen. It's like
Right.
you're graced with it. um
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think that we're sort of, but oh, I was muted. Thank you, Harold.
there we go, you're back. Okay, I was hoping it wasn't just me.
No, no, I think I must have accidentally done it. Sorry, everybody. We are back now. I'm not sure exactly where I got muted,
It
but
was
you.
right when we went back to you from me. So I was talking about grace, and then you
Okay,
took it.
yeah. So the grace. I just wanted to point in real quick that that could be heard from the ego mind, right? Of I was graced specially, like it was gifted to me because I did some special thing or behaved in some special way. Whereas no, you were graced with it as a birthright, as when we were created, not the us that we think we are, in the physical form necessarily, but in our inception, that was there, and Yeah, in that moment, it's kind of impossible to talk about how that happened, right? I love the word that we were graced with it. But I just want to be people to be careful that you weren't graced with it because, right?
Right.
You were just graced with it. I mean,
We
if you're
all
going to say because that's the nature of who you are, right? It's the essence of what we're made of. Um,
and that's common, right? What as soon as that, so there, I just keep using the rock climb one. So there, you are the wall or whatever, right? There's no, you're in the zone, and then there's that initial, that initial slice. It's almost like it's just sliced right through, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I was really in it. As soon as you're in that separation, it can go all sorts of ways, right? You can get to the top and be the champion, the best rock climber of the universe. You could then be the chosen one and go off and create like rock climbing schools and be like the rock climbing god. And you can, it can become whatever. Once you're in the land of duality of it, it can go anywhere. It doesn't.
right.
The point is that now you're not in that now.
Or because it's the land of dualism, it could be the world stomping on you version of specialness too, right?
Mm.
The I failed to reach the top. Whatever. I got the silver medal. I didn't. I didn't succeed in the way I thought I should or could, and then we identify with that. With that ego story of oh woe is me. You know how terrible my life is that I couldn't do this thing. I can't be happy now. I
Yeah.
can't experience love. I can't experience peace. It's all to do with the result and the condition. And it's not a conditional thing we're talking about. Um, the ego wants to make everything into something conditional, something dualistic, something either or, something that lives in the world of form. Um, and so yeah, I just thought that the idea of the pursuit of happiness, and I don't even like to use the word happiness that much anymore because it can so easily be misinterpreted. So what I really mean is when I say happiness, I mean the peace and the love of God, right? A spiritual essence of who we are. Not just I'm happy, like I'm high, like I'm in a high mood. So I don't mean that when I say happy. I mean, in the pursuit of happiness, I mean the pursuit of love and peace and beauty and joy. Um, and we're all kind of somewhere in the pursuit of happiness. One of my favorite quotes is, um, uh, "Isn't it nice to, at some point, every once in a while, in the pursuit of happiness, just stop and be happy?" And that kind of speaks to what I'm talking about, right? Because let's start with the circular thinking of the ego. So here's how it goes: is okay, I've been happy before. Um, I don't remember exactly what got me there. I did. I don't want to look at that too closely, but I think it has something to do with attaining a certain level of material success or having a certain kind of partner, romantic partner, business partner, having certain kinds of friends. It could be any kind of condition, right? Like if we set a goal, the goal will almost certainly have some kind of happiness at the heart of it. So the ego says, okay, so I was happy, when I did that thing, or I see other people happy after they've achieved this goal thing. We say, okay, I'm going to work towards that. And then if I don't achieve it, then that just means I'm a horrible, worthless person that doesn't deserve happiness. Right? And if I do, I get to be happy for a moment, but because the thought system that I'm running off of is based on pursuit, I gotta go pursue something else because that it's made of pursuit, right? And so the ego says, yeah, I'm here now. I met the condition. And because fundamentally the source of our happiness is not that, we look around and we say, this is it? I thought this would be better. Right? I think most people probably have that kind of experience at some point in their life. And then the chase is on again. And it's this very, we don't look at it, and it never occurs to us, what if peace of mind and love and joy is the very nature of who we are, and the very pursuit, not physically, the mental pursuit is the very thing that is the barrier to that peace and that love and that joy. So it never occurs to us the very pursuit might just be the construct, the thing that stops us from enjoying ourselves now, being at peace now, being at love. Now, I don't mean that as a strategy, because I'm guessing you could very easily turn that into, okay, so Tyler's strategy for peace and love and joy is identify your current pursuits of happiness, and then look at those, and then stop doing those, and then say to myself 3 times backwards, happiness now, or something like that, right? I'm speaking descriptively as best I can, not prescriptively. Just pointing out, here's what we do. Here's how tricky the ego can be when we're in it. We're unhappy, and happiness looks like a manufacturing expedition. So we set off on a manufacturing expedition, never occurring to us we might be in the wrong expedition. We say, no, I'm not doing the expedition right. Right? I need a different factory. I need a different setting. More specifically, I need more. I got the amount of money I thought would make me happy. Clearly, I was wrong. I need more. Or I got the kind of partner I thought would make me happy. Clearly, I was wrong. I need a better partner. I need a different partner. I got the level of physical fitness I thought would make me happy. Clearly, I was wrong. I need to take it up a notch. Right? I need to work out 2 times a day, 3 times a day. Maybe that will make me happy. Maybe I'll find peace in that. And at some point, maybe it's today, maybe it's 40 years from now, I don't know. You might just slow down enough to experience the truth of who you are and be at peace now. And then, of course, you'll be off and running again with the next ritual. But if you have enough space, enough altitude, enough level of understanding, sort of spiritual understanding, not intellectual, the more you can see kind of what we're all doing most of the time, which is we're in pursuit of that which we are. If you just see that, you'll stop. or at least you'll slow down enough to catch a whiff of it, if you will. And then you'll slow down a little bit more. And then you'll speed back up again, and that's okay. So Harold, feel free to jump in anytime. I realize I'm monologuing here, so save me, please.
Well, what I was thinking when you were saying that is, if you want to exercise 3 times a day, go for it. If you want to make
that's okay. Yeah, I don't want to demonize the form.
Yeah, because
I don't want to do that
matter.
either.
Like it's actually in, it's usually in the doing of something that we experience the grace, and then, the flow, or whatever whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it doesn't mean don't do stuff.
Yeah.
certainly participate in life and the world. Absolutely.
And it's so tricky because part of it is it's a letting go, it's a release. It's not I am gonna conquer this rock, right? It's like there's a release. You just give yourself over to the rock, and you and the rock as 2 separate things become one thing. You become the movement of the thing. So it's there isn't a prescription in the sense that if you just do this you got this, but part of it is is in the doing of whatever it is, and it could be meditating, it could be, which is like the least amount of doing that usually we do.
But then even in that, right, or we can get to be doing a lot in our mind to try to get to that place.
Yeah, just like when we're on the rock, we're like, if I can just make it to this next level, I can just get to that part, and then we're out of it anyway. We're already in me and the rock. But
so if you just begin to see, and again, it's just a little willingness. A little willingness is all that's required. To look and see, it's not about the form. It's not about the behavior. Do what you want to do. By all means, do what you want to do. Right?
Yeah, because when you're doing what you want to do, it's usually easier to access this. If you hate laundry, it's not likely that you're gonna experience the grace of God while doing the laundry. It's usually in something that we're willing to give ourselves completely over to, which is usually something we love. So at the end of the day, do what you love and give yourself over to it.
Right. Yeah. And again, descriptively, right? You're pointing towards tendencies here. Yeah, you could experience it doing the dishes, though, right? It's not likely if you hate the dishes.
Because if you hate it, you're in a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the important part, sort of the difference that makes the difference, is it's just not about that. It's in you. It's in us all the time, every time, and it's formless. It's not to do with the form. That's the only mistake we make. We bump into it because it's always there. So you're going to bump into it sometimes. Even if you do your damnedest to push away your well-being, which most of us are very practiced at that, and we don't know it. Maybe we'll do another show on that. But if we bump into it, and then we say, it was because of what I was doing when I bumped into it. And then we make it about that. So what you were doing is inconsequential to that which is always present. Because sometimes you're doing that thing and other times you're not doing that thing. But this ever-present essence that would be to effectively limit your capacity to experience it. There is no limit on it, but we, as the individual, seemingly individual selves that we think we are, can place limits on it without knowing that we're doing that. And then we mistake it. We get it backwards. We think, okay, I was, to go with the rock climbing. I was doing the rock climbing. I experienced the peace and the love of God. And then we somehow, again, our kind of crazy, insane ego thought system tells us, I guess I can only experience this while rock climbing. And even then, only some of the time, right? And then it just becomes this whole messy, ritualistic, hoo-ha, crazy thing. So I realize we're running a little over on time, Harold, but anything you want to kind of add in at the end here?
No, I think my last parting shot was the one.
You just wanted me to say parting shot, didn't you?
Yeah, I was waiting for it. You've trained me. I'm like Pavlov's dog. Do what you love. Give yourself over to it.
Yeah. In a funny kind of way, don't worry about it so much.
Yeah.
Right? Just live your life. You're going to bump into the truth of who you are more and more. And don't make a big thing out of it, because it's always there. It's just true. It's you. And so enjoy it. All right, Harold. So until next week, let's give people... Oh, yeah. No, next week. I think we might be off for a week or two. So
we're not sure what this is looking like.
Yeah, we'll be sure to let you folks know when our next call is going to be. But whenever that is, if we don't see you, or if you don't see us, I guess it'd be more apt. Have a wonderful holiday season, and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that good stuff. And in the meantime, if you want to watch some of our old shows, or reach out to Harold or I to talk to us about this kind of conversation, to explore it more for yourself, we coach people, we lead people on this journey. So you can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And Harold, how about you?
You can find me on Facebook, The Awakening Heart, or you can follow my blog, which is hearttotihand.wordpress.com.
Fantastic. So everyone out there, have a wonderful rest of the year, and we shall see you on the other side. So with all the love in the world, we'll see you next time.